Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Living with Hep B. This one I'm super excited for. I have a good friend, David Doan, speaking to us today. He has a deeply personal story with hepatitis B, and we'll just be talking about his story as well as some everyday things about his life now and how he's dealt with Hep B. So stay tuned, and I'm glad you're joining us. David, welcome. If you could introduce yourself, that would be great.
Sure. Thank you so much, Richard. I love this opportunity we have together just to casually discuss and share stories. But really, I think what we end up with, I hope, in the end of this story is a message I think you want to take away and consider how you want to use that information. So, my name is David Doan, and I've been in healthcare for a long time, over 25 years. I do work for a consulting firm, a very big global consulting firm, and I'm a senior manager there. So that's what I do. I definitely have certain other passions as well. And I'm delighted to get started and just sharing my story.
Great, great. We would love to hear how hepatitis B has affected you and what brings you here today.
Yes, hepatitis B or Hep B definitely has played a huge role as far as the health aspect of my family, my immediate family, but also my extended family. So I guess I start with personally how it has affected me. I'm going to share something that you have to kind of be comfortable in listening to this, but it's reality. This is what some people do suffer. Some people have to go through and make sure that you just have to be open minded and how someone might come up to them knowing that they have the hepatitis B diagnosis. So I was living in Boston. That's one of the cities I live in for quite a long time, and it was around 2009, 2010. I wasn't feeling very well. I was very tired and just very lethargic, and I've been always been very active, play sports, and never had to really worry about why something would come down. It wasn't a cold or a flu-like symptoms, and I knew I was traveling every week as a consultant. Traveling every week on a plane, it can be very taxing. But I knew something else was going on that I couldn't even go to see my primary care provider or doctor because I was traveling so much. So in October, we had the Columbus Day off, and I remember vividly on Monday, and I went into Mass General Hospital, MGH, a huge hospital in Houston. I'm sorry, in Boston, and I just I don't feel well. I'm a nurse. I know when my symptoms is just not coinciding what I believe it would be. So I got all my tests checked, and literally everything got checked out. You can name it from your typical chemistry panel, your lipid panels, your CBC, complete blood count, and all of the other sexually transmitted diseases that you can think of to screen out and rule out. And nothing came back except for I just had a really bad bout of allergy symptoms. And I've always taken Allegra every day, but I had to be augmented with some nasal, inhalers and steroids. So I said, okay. But I walked out of the ER at MGH in Boston. I did. It's like, no, there's something more. I just went with my gut because that's what I would tell anyone. And I went to Fenway Health, and Fenway Health is a nonprofit organization. I go there every week to get tested for HIV, and I wanted to go back there just to kind of screen that out and screen out. And that day, on Columbus Day on that year, I found out I was HIV positive. So just the sequelae from the physical, psychosocial, mental, familial aspect of managing this new diagnosis was more than overwhelming. So you can probably expect the typical reaction to something that is very life-threatening and very life-altering event. So through all of the follow-up, and I had access, healthcare access is very important to me too. I had access to the greatest doctors and infectious disease specialists and so on. And through those rigorous kind of like follow up on labs and getting me on antiviral medication immediately,
Mhm.
what we also, we meaning my like specialists and my primary care team and me, I was very heavily involved with my own care because I'm a nurse and I know what I need to do and I can relate and understand the language of medical. And I noticed that my liver enzymes was slightly elevated. And me, I'm just like very type A. I was like, what is this about? It's like, I was told it's probably just because of all of the new onset of the virus from HIV. Your body is just in hyper, just hyperactive and just managing that. So I demanded a specialist to look at my liver enzymes and so on. So tons of more tests. If you have gone through this type of battery of tests, you know what to expect. And lo and behold, I was told that I have dormant hepatitis B that has been inflamed by this new recent infection. And not just like, oh my gosh, is this one big thing? Do I have to deal with a second thing? And I remember prior to entering into nursing school, I've already received my Hep B vaccination series. It was 3 series over a period of 6 months and so on. And I said, oh my gosh, it's never even like, I would never have thought that I have this as a carrier. So when I started to talk within my family, I realized that my mom has been on treatment with antiviral for Hep B, but she didn't really understand or really know how to share it or whether she should share it, just kind of personal. Everybody has their own medical history. And then I realized that my family on my mom's side, I have 11 aunts and uncles because it's a family of 12. I realized that 5 that I'm aware of are on some sort of antiviral treatment for Hep B. And that just made me like, oh my gosh, this is like a really big problem. And of course, there's a stigma to it because, most people assume is about sex. It's about a disease or about a diagnosis. So that's something that I have to overcome but luckily, because my family has already dealt with this, within my family, that conversation is fine. It was just the HIV diagnosis that I only kept contained to my mom. So anyway, I think I'm taking too much time here, but that's how I was made aware of hepatitis B in greater detail. Like clinically, I know what it is, I know what that is and the profile of someone who would got, but then I really understand more of how certain population or communities, like for example, Asian Pacific American or Asian Pacific, AAPI Islanders tend to have higher incidence and prevalence. And I dug deeper and deeper into the literature and really flooded myself with a lot of knowledge, which is what I typically do when I am resorting to my defense mechanism to try to get control over my health situation. So let me pause here, and then there's more to the story, but that's how I was made aware of my diagnosis.
Thank you so much, David, for sharing. That's really brave of you. And it is quite timely. We just had one of our physician education sessions where the topic was co-infection with hepatitis B and HIV. And I think the way in which you found out about your hepatitis B is something that's actually pretty normal because people don't have symptoms for hepatitis B. It's some other health screening, some other problem that presents in which hepatitis B is found through a series of tests. And so, unfortunately, since hepatitis B testing alone isn't that common, that's a way in which it's found. But I'm glad for you that it was found so that you could do something about it. It was very interesting when you talked about how when you started to maybe ask your family, a bunch of people were actually taking medication to treat Hep B. And I'm wondering, before that, did you have any inkling of this disease being in your family, or was it just something people didn't talk about?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was not made aware of it, and I think it's cultural. I think we just don't talk about certain things, and a lot of time we just don't talk about what I call quote in air quote bad things, or it's very private. So I was not made aware of it because I'm always someone who speak up and really share and communicate. It did welcome that type of dialogue, but it wasn't easy because then I started to shift about being nervous about my mom and like, trying to understand. I realized she was having so many side effects and so on because the medication is quite strong. Most people within our community do react to medication, in a different way than someone else. So I was more like I was worried about me, but then I was like, oh my gosh, they have to worry about their health as well. So it was comfortable talk, but I was not made aware of it. So that just allowed us to talk about that more. However, one thing that looking back, I wish I was more adamant about doing something about that information. For example, I kept it and we all kept it privately, but it wasn't like I went to every single one of my aunt and uncle, including my brother, and say, hey, do you want to get tested to see if, and this has been confirmed and so on, that it was passed down from how I got it, passed down from my mother. She has her diagnosis and the Hep B virus, same with her siblings through my maternal grandmother. So meaning that we should have been encouraging everyone in the family to get tested, but that didn't happen.
Yeah, I think you really just hit it on the head right there. It is something that people don't talk about, and because of cultural norms and stigma, it's not something people talk about. And we always say that, of course, if one family member has this, that other family members should be tested. And we hope that physicians and doctors and providers also say the same thing. But because of things like stigma, because of uneasiness, because of lack of understanding, and often because of some cultural things having to do with not bringing bad disease or bad information to the family, people don't find out, even when it could save people's lives, and when treatment is good treatment is possible. And so unfortunately it falls on advocates like us, or really forward thinking personal advocates like yourself, to talk to family members, to bring them together, to really kind of force the topic so that people can be healthy, and that nobody has to suffer. So once you found out that some of your family members had it and you had it, what was your next course of action in your journey?
Yeah, one thing I wanted to say that it's almost like a blessing. I know it's weird to say that I was diagnosed with HIV, because when I saw the specialist that specializes in Hep B, I realized that I was able to be fortunate enough to start antiviral medication that allows to be able to treat both diagnoses. So that's what I'm on now, one pill a day. And the pill that I am on, there's evidence as far as the being able to address both viruses. So that's a blessing, because who knew I could also be affected by liver cancer and the sequelae of that. So that's an important message, is that sometimes it's a blessing when we find out something is not welcoming. The other thing is, I think education is so important, because it's hard to say this diagnosis or share it with anyone. Like things that you probably know when I share this with you is, if you want to be, if you are going to meet someone and you have intention to be intimate with someone, it is their right and your responsibility to share those type of information. That is not easy. So I lean on just the clinical information that I need to be armed with. So you're going to get immersed. If I wasn't a nurse, I'd probably be so overwhelmed with the literature, with the information, with the options, with the side effects, with what do I do now? It's also a blessing too, because my brother and I, and also my mom, the three of us are extremely close, very, very close. That sharing these two night diagnoses with my younger brother, it was hard because he's very protective of me. Sharing with my mom was even more devastating. But I needed to share with her because it's important because you have to think about, what if I don't, hang on, let me say, what if something might have happened to me? I don't want to surprise her, like, why might I be sick?
Mhm.
And when I was told by a specialist that if you, meaning me, if I don't take care of this and address both diagnoses, the the potential of me needing a liver transplant is on the horizon. Who would want to even imagine that situation? So
Right.
that diagnosis allowed my mom to take me back to my country in Vietnam for the very first time and the only time in 2008 or whatever. Yes, that I went back. So because we were thinking that what if there's something has been really awful that would happen to my health, knowing these two very, very dire diagnoses. So that allowed me to really explore, to go back to see my country and so on. And I came back and I just felt like just after a few months, I was absolutely normal as far as
Mm.
I have never had an elevated, not even just a few points of my liver enzymes. My CD4 is actually normal, like just like anybody else. I've been literally normal, but I depend on that one pill a day for both diagnoses. So I think I got lost here, but how I really wanted to respond to you is sometimes you just have no choice but to accept the information and diagnosis in a way that you can be detriment about it, or you can really turn it around and educate someone and be able to speak about it. Because if I don't, I could get into a clinical depression that certainly will not help with my physical health, but also or surround myself around people who will accept me for who I am and what I have, and be able to lean on that support system is critically important to surviving, but also give you the strength and physical strength to be able to beat whatever diagnosis. So I think that's an important message.
Absolutely. So you talked about how your family's really close, and then you found out about this diagnosis. Did you get the chance to ask if, for example, your brother had been tested or suggest he get tested? We just talked about how it's such an important thing, and I'm wondering if you had the opportunity or how that went for you, asking your brother to get tested if you did, or about his hepatitis B status.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I always suggested that, you know what, because we all know now how we all have this diagnosis. And I did share that with him. He was a music teacher and educator. He has 5 kids that he's taking care of. It's probably like the last thing, when you don't have any symptoms. And of course, his quote, the way he lives with my lifestyle and his are different in a way. So at the time, there was no sense of urgency, but I also didn't press upon it too, because I just don't want to make him feel doom, or even though I feel like that's the necessary thing that in short of it, he did not get tested for Hep B.
One more question I wanted to ask was one we're always curious about, especially for folks that may have tested positive a decade ago, around that time frame, is whether when you found out, whether your physicians um, were aware of the disease and really seemed knowledgeable and knew what to do and were informed to tell you about the risks. We do hear that some folks, when they discover that they have their diagnoses, especially in the late 80s and early 90s, weren't really informed of what that meant. And that could have been either miscommunication or maybe the doctor's not explaining it well.
Yeah, I definitely would go back to, I was so fortunate living in Boston with just the caliber of physicians and how forward thinking as far as the latest research. And I did have 2 specialists. So having a specialist is important on the HIV side, and also on, just having ENT and really diving GI specialist is important. So just my specialist that manages the Hep B diagnosis, she was just phenomenal. She's from Beth Deaconess Israel Hospital, and she was just educating me about it does make sense, and she was educating me about why Southeast Asia is such has high prevalence and incidence of that. So I was very fortunate. I had the best of the best of the best. I also wanted to say that the care was very well coordinated between the two specialists, because that's not always an experience that someone goes through. So I was very fortunate. I don't know if I would have fared as well if I might not have had access to those great physicians.
And I'm curious, when your family members began going on medication, did they see it as a very normal thing, a very serious thing, or kind of like something you might take like aspirin for cholesterol, a daily thing, or was this a much more present issue in their mind? If you could just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I don't. I can't speak for all of them, but I think collectively, I don't think they saw it or view it as something very serious. It's more of, you have this diagnosis, this is the medication that's been prescribed to you, take it every day and let us know if you have side effects. Okay. So it's more of a, they come from probably a culture where it's very paternalistic, where this is what is prescribed to you, you take it. I don't believe they were thinking of, if you don't take it, you might have liver cancer. And I don't even know they associate that. Maybe they do, I'm not sure, but it's very of, this is what they needed to do. My mom, I really was more involved with her care because she just couldn't take certain medication because it was just so hard on her as far as nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, all the things. But I can only speak for her. She understands the importance of taking it, so she struggled through going through the treatment just because she also was aware of the seriousness of the diagnosis.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay, so I was wondering if you could move on to talk about your brother a little bit more, if that's okay with you.
Yeah, sure. This one is always a little harder to talk about because I've always have been very protective of my brother. I'm the older and he's the younger, and he's 3 years younger, but it doesn't seem like 3 years is a long time apart. But because my mom has always been a single mom for the 18 years before I was, so my mom kept her promise that she won't get remarried until I turned 18, and sure enough, that's what she did. So that, the first 18 years of life, it was like me serving in this kind of like father-like role. So he was kind of resentful. So anytime I always tell him, you got to do your homework, you got to eat.
Yeah.
So I get that. So this is hard because he's such a hard worker, and he's one of those people, it doesn't matter which ethnic group you are, one of those people that will not go to the doctor unless he's actually like not able to walk and he's in severe pain. And that's exactly what that was. He had access to healthcare and so on. He was not regular in getting PCP checkup and so on. And frankly, if you don't have any the symptoms, why would anyone request, can you scream if I have B?
Right.
Dialogue that anyone would have.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest problems.
Yes, right. And he was having problems. He had allergies too. We both have really bad allergies. New Jersey is where he lived, and he worked in Manhattan and so on. So he was working just like I always work. And he just like, oh my gosh, I'm coughing all the time. I'm coughing. I'm feeling pain. I'm always like very tired and so on and so on. And I said, well, why don't you get a checkup? Same thing, very busy, can't deal with it right now. Until the pain, his epigastric pain up here, right in the middle of, he could not endure any longer. Like, when you conduct, you just have to be physically fit too. And he went in and got checked into the ER and got the battery of work, and his liver enzyme was elevated, extremely elevated. And he was, all his labs were out of whack. And that was in 2017. It was the end of May, beginning of June. And when he was admitted to the hospital in New Jersey, he was in there for about 4 days. It took a long time to get the diagnosis, a long time. A lot of screening, a lot of ultrasound, a lot of this and that scan and so on. He was diagnosed with Hep B, of course. But what was very traumatic was liver cancer stage 3, leaning on stage 4. And this is like the very first time that he was introduced to the healthcare system. He never had any reason to go to the hospital. I had my appendix removed when I was in middle school, so that's my only visit to the hospital. This is his first. He never left the hospital. He was quickly moved from that hospital in Jersey City to New York Presbyterian in New York City, because that's where they have a whole liver, specialties and tons of doctors from Columbia University and so on. In short of it, he passed away 2 months by living his last 2 months in the hospital bed. So it's hard. So that's the first time he got introduced to Hep B, unfortunately, with liver cancer, and literally did everything. I mean, I was on the call, I was on the phone. My mom stayed by his bedside every single day in various hospital rooms for 2 months until his passing. He was transferred. Ultimately, the last 2 weeks was in the inpatient hospital in the Bronx, Calvary Hospital. So that's hard.
Wow, I'm so sorry for your loss. That transition from not interacting with the healthcare system at all to being diagnosed with late stage liver cancer. And how old was he?
Yeah, he was he was 40 years old. I take that back. So sorry. He was 43 years old. That was 4 years ago. 43 years old when he passed away. But if you look at him, he looked like he was like probably in his late 20s. Just always looked young, vivacious, very. But yeah.
So your brother went from feeling pain and coughing and tired to feeling intense pain to finding out that he had hepatitis B and then subsequently late stage liver cancer. I mean, and then for him to pass away just 2 months later, it is still mind-blowing to me that this disease does this, that it can go from someone feeling almost perfectly fine or normal to passing away within the year. It's one of the things that really gets me up in the morning, because this is something we can stop. This is something we can prevent. We have all the tools necessary, and it's not even like the tools are that expensive or time consuming or complex. Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. Definitely a shock for everyone. And we have a lot of healthcare. We have 4 nurses, 2 physician assistant, 1 nurse practitioner, a lot of pharmacists. So all of that, it doesn't matter. I think my point is it doesn't matter. You can also be able to have access to the greatest healthcare. Is just one of the, is pernicious, is very, it shocks you, and it comes out of nowhere. And just imagine, getting that diagnosis, never was able to go home, and just spending your last 2 months. And he had a full life ahead of him. Like, right. He at the peak of his career, and also personally, his children, his 1 dog, and he never goes on vacation for years. We're talking like over a decade. And that same year in November, he would be taking a cruise. So
it's like, yeah, in the middle of his life, and just when he's going to start taking a break and sitting in all the stuff that he deserves, right? Like taking advantage, relishing that. It's, yeah.
Yeah, it was really hard. And you know what was really hard is seeing my mom suffer. In addition to seeing my brother, it's like all these other things that comes about. It doesn't matter how strong, how smart you are. I may have my PhD in healthcare administration. I might be a nurse. It doesn't matter.
Right.
It doesn't matter, because you feel helpless, hopeless. You feel frustrated. You feel anger. All of the typical, the feelings that you feel when you feel like something is just not supposed to happen to you or anyone. So yeah, that's hard.
Thank you again. And this is probably a good segue to talk about what we should be doing as advocates, as citizens, good citizens who care about public health in this issue, what would you say?
I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Richard. I feel like I'm getting to know you better and better and better in a way that is like it's almost like, why would I want to know you better? I also wanted to say thank you for what you do with your organization, because this is a forum that is unique and is not, I don't believe that is just available across the country. And also, I wanted to thank the people ahead of me who might have shared their stories in any way, whether it's on video or not. There's a message in the story to be shared, but there's also these other things that are all invisible. It's like how someone deal with it, psychosocial, the ability to manage all of that. So there's an opportunity for education, I think. Education, because I was educated about the severity and just how common it might be for someone within our APA community to consider or think about getting tested and screening for Hep B. I think is an important message is let's demystify the myth and the stigma, because I think that's a hindrance and a barrier to receiving just preventive care. And that is not just about Hep B, it goes across in many other types of conditions and diagnoses as well. What I really wanted to share is lean on the people who've already gone through down this role, but then be able to make adjustment in your life now to get tested or inform other people that they also need to consider getting tested despite they are feeling healthy, and maybe dive deeper into your familial history, because sometimes there may be insight. You might know a cousin or an aunt or whoever that you might say, oh, that gives me flag. And there's certain profile, like I was born in Saigon, I came here. So people who actually were born there, there's that the stats are there for people to heed, but I think people need to be aware of it. So having your organization, getting the message out, raising awareness, using education as a way to arm people to help influence their behavior. I think that is what we want to impress upon. If I can leave, any message behind is, I don't want you to feel the pain and the struggle of what my family has to go through, and use that as a way to, if you want to support me in any way, think about your own situation, your own life, your own family, and consider, and it is covered by insurance company, and it is something that it is your, benefits, and it's also you need to have information about your health, and that includes screening for hepatitis B, just like now we have to screen for COVID tests. So yes.
Yeah, I feel like I couldn't say it better myself, David. I think when we do this work, a lot of folks still think, oh, this is a disease from back east or in developing countries. It doesn't affect me now anymore. It's not going to affect anyone I know. You still see the same thing with COVID, even though it's everywhere. I mean, people always have this mindset, and then people also discover that they actually have it in their family without even knowing it, sort of like you did, and sort of like our previous storyteller. If you've seen our first episode with Alan, it's the same thing. And so I think there's a reoccurring theme here that so many people have told us is just learn about it and just get people tested, ask family members, and you could save a life. And like David has said, avoid the tragic suffering that occurs so commonly with hepatitis B, unfortunately, when we could prevent that. You kind of answered this question, I think. Is there anything you'd go back and really try to do? I mean, hindsight's always 2020, but do differently, tell yourself or tell your family members or tell your brother?
Yeah, it's a good and a hard question for me to answer. I think about my brother passing every day, of course. It's a balance between respecting someone's decision and there's also a balance between invading and be intrusive in their life. And there's a balance of if I can do anything to prevent him having that diagnosis that took his life, I would have been more intrusive. I would have been louder. I would have been demanding him to go to the doctor and get screened, because with treatment, you can prevent or at least slow down for many years. Um, Hep B doesn't have to turn into liver cancer, is what I'm saying. So I don't want to say regret, because I couldn't live with my life if I just have all these regrets all the time.
Right.
But I would have, hindsight, like you said, who knew that that was the outcome of, of of his going into just checking in why he's just very tired, couldn't breathe, and coughing a lot and have gastric pain. If I could just somehow that was too late. So maybe I should have just said that when I found out of my diagnosis, that's when I should have just said, you know what, you are going to get screened because of these reasons. So it's hard. It's hard because you never can predict the future, and we all mind our own business. So you can only impart information, just like when you're giving feedback. I always, I can give you and share your information. I can impart the information, but it's really up to the receiver to take the information, however that person chooses to use it or not. So that's, it's hard to balance that out.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that answer. I know it's difficult. To try to take a more positive turn, I think I'd love to ask, if someone is watching this right now and has just been diagnosed with hepatitis B or thinks that they might have it, what would you tell that person?
Yes. I wish I would. I want to know you because I can relate. That's one thing, because I'm just a carer and I just want to support people and just listen. It's really not about me giving you answer. I would always acknowledge that anytime you have any diagnosis, anything, just diabetes, for example, hypertension, hypercholesteremia, whatever it is, take it as a wake-up call. I used to specialize in open heart recovery unit, and the people who tend to have open heart recovery unit, open heart attacks and having to have heart surgery, are ones that are very type A and they don't know how to just relax and so on. Just take it as a almost like a life lesson, a second chance, and then see how you can turn that into something positive. That something positive is get treatment and surround yourself with people that you can lean on as your support system, and then take care of yourself, because if you can't take care of yourself, you cannot take care of another person. But then what you learn and what you went through, if you feel like there's something that you can share to maybe prevent something, or maybe get someone to get diagnosed earlier for them to receive treatment, that's something that you can consider. But I would say that it won't be easy. And definitely everyone react to news and notification of whatever diagnosis differently. But just take care of yourself. And there's people out there that, whether you call unfortunately or fortunately, can probably relate to you. Reach out to support system. And if anyone give you any sense of where you don't feel like it's a safe space because people just react negatively and so on, there's other people that you can surround yourself with, even just a nonprofit organization, Richard, that you have. There's just people to help you go through it. So you don't have to do it alone, but kind of channel the perceived negative things that you just heard or received into something that can help yourself and eventually for others. I think that's literally what legacy is all about. It doesn't have to be profound impact. It doesn't have to be some monumental, that you have to reach some sort of zenith to really say, I have influenced positive social change. It could just literally be a message to a colleague or a friend and share that. And that is enough for you to feel good about what just happened to you.
Perfect. I think for those of you listening, you heard it. You have others. You're not alone. I think that's one of the first things people find out, feel like they're alone or have to keep this deep, dark secret. You don't. There's plenty of support networks. In fact, I think a new global website that has quite a bit of traffic. I believe it is hepbcommunity.org. I will put that at the bottom of this part of the video and on the comments part, but it is a global website where people are asking questions. You can ask your physician. Usually there are local support groups. You can reach out to nonprofits like mine for help and guidance. And I think as you can see, although we just heard this quite sad story about David's brother, you can see David is here with us today, was able kind of by luck to discover his Hep B chronic infection and has been managing it along with his HIV infection since with a pill a day. And as you heard earlier, his numbers and health stats are completely normal and healthy. So the other thing I want to stress here, and I'm sure David would agree, is that just because you are diagnosed with the Hep B virus isn't meaning you're going to immediately get liver cancer or that your life is doomed. It is just, unfortunately, when nothing is done about it, when it's not managed and it becomes that deadly liver disease or deadly liver cancer, when at that point it's too late to go back and change it. And so there's definitely a light at the end of the tunnel. And I think David would also agree that this is the reason why we're both out here doing it. This is the reason why he's having this conversation, because he wants folks like you listening to know that there is hope, that there is more that we can do, whether you're someone who has the disease or you are just learning about it here with us today. I want to just take a turn, and we've talked a lot about the seriousness of the disease and learn a little bit more about your everyday life now, David, things you like doing, things, I guess, has Hep B affected your daily life other than this pill? Is it kind of an afterthought for you now?
Yeah, I don't even think about it. And it's not to say that I'm not aware that I have this diagnosis, is because mainly I am receiving treatment and I check in every 4 months, quarterly, every 3 months rather. So, and I'm good as far as like what I don't think about it. It doesn't consume me. I know my health. I know it's always good to know what you have and don't have as far as your diagnoses. So I am aware of it. If anything else, the only time that like slightly more, like once in upon a time, I might be drinking too much wine. I said, oh God, I got to make sure. But that's more about, it's more like my type A, like making sure I don't do anything in extreme, more as opposed to like that diagnosis is like changing my life in any way negatively. It's not that. So no, it is manageable when you get treatment early and you are being treated.
Great. One of the final questions I'll say is, well, I was going to ask, do you currently do any Hep B advocacy now? But I mean, by joining me today, you are. But I guess I should tell the audience how I got connected with David. Was really one of these, just when social activities and trying to be involved in the community come together, working with groups, actually, Asian employee resource groups working on the Asian American violence that had been occurring and having talks about what we should be doing. I was able to start having these conversations with different employees at different companies around that subject, but also around other important Asian American issues. And I think more or less, David and I, our paths crossed, and I happened to tell him what he did. And he said, personally, he reached out and said, this is something really important to me. And so I'm wondering, my two questions are, what Hep B advocacy have you been doing? I already sort of know the answer to this, but I want folks to listen. And then two, what would you suggest people can do in terms of their advocacy as an everyday person?
Sure. You meet people not really by chance, is what I've always said. And also things don't always happen. There's always a reason why things happen. So I just believe that for right now. It was so awesome that we were able to collaborate on what a possible event would be to really share this message. So it was started with, I belong to a few employee resource group or ERG within my consulting firm that I work for. Let's get this message out to our Asian Pacific American ERG. And then when I started to talk, people say, well, how come this message couldn't be shared with this group and that group and so on? And the short of it is it ballooned into every single ERG, almost every single ERG, not just in Southern California, but Northern California. And everyone is so excited, even though it was a good turnout, but it's not as many more. I wish there's more people that would have actually attended that virtual informational session to share information about hepatitis B and C. What I got even to this day, Richard, believe it or not, this week in other conversation, people were saying thank you. The word thank you comes up all the time. And thank you for what? Thank you for educating me. Thank you for shedding a light. Thank you for letting me aware of something that's so important. Thank you for sharing your story because it made me think about not just that. Those words, they are like priceless because what we just did is sharing important health information about them, their lives, and their family. And we did that virtually. And I think that was very powerful. So that's an example of, I think, advocacy. Advocacy is just about sharing information, raising awareness, and sharing the message of how important it is to get screening and get treated and so on. So if that is called advocacy, that's great, but I would want to do more. There's a small fundraising campaign that's still going on. It's not even an amount of how much we will raise at the end of this campaign. That's not the message here. The message is people, whatever they can give and offer, just being able to do whatever active part you think you can do. I like to share my story with other people. I can admit, I don't like to share my stories because I cannot ever not have emotions because it's about my life, my brother, and my family. But I know it's important to share because if I have to use my story so people can think about considering, getting tested, I'm willing to do that because it's like mentally draining for me. Like I have to enter in a space that I want to do it. And I have to allow myself at least 15 minutes when I'm done sharing the story just to kind of like recharge myself emotionally. So that is advocacy, is sharing the message.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we're so happy and thankful, grateful for you to do that. I just have two more questions for you. The first one being, is there anything else you would want people watching this video to know? And again, these folks may be advocates, these folks may be patients looking for support. Anything else that I have missed or that you have missed that you want to mention?
No, I don't think so. I talk a lot already, so I think I share a lot of messages. Yes, I think awareness and support system is important. Sometimes when you receive a diagnosis of anything, or when you have been traumatized in some way, or when you just need help, one life lesson that is not really related to the topic we talk about, you actually know who your true friends are, and even your family members. So sometimes that's a gift to me because I get to know who I can lean on and sincerely really, trust people or allow myself to really say that person is genuine. So I think that's important. And if anything at all, can you just help not talk about any diagnosis in a way that is somehow stigmatizing to people? There's already enough barriers out there.
Yep.
There truly are. So you don't need to add your kind of like your personal, perspective that is not productive and is not healthy and is not going to allow someone else to do something good and right and healthy for them. I think that is the very least you can do is to let yourself go of your whatever your prejudices and biases and so on, because people have enough to deal with already about their health.
That's a great final point. The last question is a fun one. We're still, it's August 20th. We're still in the COVID Delta kind of rise. And I'm wondering, what is the biggest thing you are looking forward to doing when all of this is behind us that you haven't been able to do?
Sure. Well, I share with you, I'm a consultant. So we tend to go to client site and work. even though I do like the balance of what we think will happen post-COVID as far as a more balanced travel, but I really want to just travel for pleasure.
Mhm.
I haven't been able to do because
Yeah.
it just doesn't seem right to try to schedule or plan a trip in the midst of Delta. Hopefully, we are going to stop and shun away the lambda, which I've been reading about. But yeah,
Oh,
I think
yeah.
it's just finding a time and space where I don't feel guilty going out to eat indoors, or I don't feel guilty of planning a trip somewhere, because sometimes the optics, sometimes even for me to deal with, is hard. So that, I think that's good. And I think something more important in traveling, because it sounds very selfish what I should share, it reminds me, this pandemic reminds me that we are social beings,
Mhm.
and I need to be connected to people in addition to just the virtual, reality that we are in. So I think getting closer to people so I can sense and feel and even smell them, I think that is what I'm looking forward, is that connection with people. That is even more than what technology can offer.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, David. I could talk to you for hours and hours, and I hope to do more after this video recording. But for now, I'll try to end it here. Thank you again so much for being here, for sharing your deeply personal story. It really is something that motivates us in the advocacy world and the public health world to go out and prevent the suffering and the death that occurs from this totally preventable disease. Again, my name is Richard So. I'm the executive director of SF Hep B Free. We are a San Francisco Bay Area based organization that does education, screening, and for both the community and physicians, and really with the overall mission of eradicating hepatitis B here in the Bay Area and hopefully across the nation one day. If you're interested in learning more, you can visit us at www.sfhepbfree.org. You can visit us on Facebook by looking up SF Hep B Free. And you can just ask your doctor about hepatitis B, or look up some information online. Thank you again so much for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode. Thank you so much, David.